Good evening or good morning. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do some very basic pre-processing on a variety of images, including one-shot color, broadband, narrowband, and also a bit of monochrome camera. So we can start off here with an image of M63. This is captured with the Uranus C camera and an EVO Star 72AD, and you can see that it's not really ideal. So the very first thing we want to do with this, let's frame it a bit nicer, is to do a dynamic background extraction. Now, some people want to do an automatic background extraction, but I don't really think it's good because it usually gives some pretty ugly results. A very important thing is to increase your tolerance to 2.5, if not 3.5, depending on how bad your background is. And depending on what camera you have, you need to set nice and big sample radii. So something like this can be good, although I think I'll be using 35 just because it fits nicer. In this case, since I have a small subject here, I can increase the samples per row to maybe 15. And if there's any in sort of problematic positions next to big stars like this one was, we can move that out of the way so we get a better sample, just like that. Now for image correction, we could either do subtraction or division. I haven't noticed much of a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and discard the background model because I don't really care about it, and not enable normalization. I'm not enabling normalization because dynamic background extraction done like this has a bit of color correction built into it, which is very useful because it means less work for us. So here we go. This is the image. You'll have to forgive me. I had some framing issues with this, but this will not deter from the final result. You can see it's already looking a lot better. Now, in this case, if you have artifacts like this, which can be removed, but with very, very tedious processing, it's easier to just crop your image down. Especially with one like this, it doesn't matter too much. So we can crop down to a nicer field of view, such as this. Here we go. And now that's looking better, but it's not finished because our background is still a bit blotchy. Some strange patterns here, I'm not sure why that is, but we can see that we still have a tiny bit of a gradient here. We can go back into dynamic background extraction. We can run it twice. There's nothing wrong with running DBE multiple times. Here I've reduced the size of my framing, so I think I'll also reduce the size of the APs. And now I just place them again, make sure there's nothing in a problematic position. That is, so it's that. And you can also add some more points around areas that you think, need more removing. It's completely fine to add them manually on your own. Go back into division and subtraction, and we can run this again. Hopefully we'll see an improvement, and we do see an improvement. There is less of this sort of darkened area here. Okay, we can get rid of this. All right, but we're not finished yet. You can see that the galaxy's color is completely wrong. It's very strange to see the Sunflower Galaxy be this yellow. So what we're going to do is color calibrate using the core here. So I've selected the preview tool here, and I'm going to highlight the core. So you can see we just have the core highlighted here. I'm going to take this again. I'm going to select the piece of the background. It's not ideal to have stars on it, but it won't affect your result too much. And now we're going to go to color calibration. Here we go. I'm going to set preview 1 as the white reference because the core of galaxies are usually white. And here the background reference is going to be our preview 2. And we run this and we'll see it changes very much. So we can just reapply our auto stretch. And we can see that the colors are already a lot better in the core of the galaxy. Now, we're not finished still. What we want to do is we want to do some processing on our stars. So very quickly, we're just going to run starnet on this. And now that we have our star mask, we can temporarily close that and put it away. We're going to do a bit of pre-processing on our stars. Now, first we need to solve the image because we're going to be doing SPCC or spectrophotometric color calibration. Date and time isn't very necessary. It doesn't change much. Search up M63, which is this galaxy. Here we go. And we're going to have to change our pixel size and focal length to match that of the system we're using. So this is what I'm using. Press OK, and it will solve our image for us. Here we go. And now we move into SPCC. Now it does help if your camera has existing quantum efficiency curves, but it isn't the end of the world. You can still use it without. I do have my own curves somewhere, so I will be using the correct ones for the Uranus C, but it is, again, not necessary. You can get virtually the same results without it. So here we go. We apply the color calibration. We need to not optimize for narrowband filters because we're not using a narrowband filter. And we just run this. Here we go. And now we have finished what we needed with our stars. There's a bit of green, which isn't ideal because we don't really want green in our stars. So we just go to noise reduction, SCNR, and get rid of the green. Now, you'll notice there's some purple haloing. This isn't part of SPCC, but this is just because I'm using a doublet apochromatic refractor, so I have a lot of chromatic aberration. So that is the pre-processing needed for a galaxy like this. We could also do a bit of denoising and blurx. So an example of that would be to recombine these images. 1 second. We recombine these images using a pixel math formula. This is the pixel math formula you want to use for star combination. So we take this and we can drag just the stars. We can just rename it to stars effectively. We rename that to starless. We do that and we have our star image again. This isn't very complex. I mean, the formulae exist everywhere. Now, if we want to do blurx on this, my personal method would be first to extract monochrome luminance from it, go into image analysis, FWHM eccentricity, and to measure our FWHM. So here I have 2.495 pixels, which is perfect because now I can go into blur exterminator, 2.50, just round it, and we can sharpen our image. Now to get a quick preview, we can go back to the preview tool up here, select our preview, and run a quick blurx on this. You can see there's not a huge difference. My data isn't very good for this, but nonetheless, it helps. So we can go back to our main image. I'll increase this a bit. And select correct first. This helps to improve our result. And now run it on the entire image. Here we go. So now it's finished. We can get a nice little before and after. You can see how our stars already look a lot better. No more haloing. There we go. And now we do the final thing for pre-processing, which is noise exterminator. I'm going to run this on a rather low setting just because I'm quite conservative and I don't like to have overly denoised images. So I can quickly run this. Something to note is it's always better to run noise exterminator or any denoising without your stars, just because whenever you use StarNet or Star Exterminator, it can sometimes leave sort of ugly dots in your starless image. So that terminates the preprocessing for a galaxy. You can also have an example of a more difficult broadband image. Here we go. Now this, yeah, this looks like a mess. But we can try and preprocess this. First thing I would do is crop, because this is quite ugly here. It's not really feasible to get rid of this without just using Photoshop clone stamp, which I don't really want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to crop down to M51. There we go. It's quite good. All right. if I can get a perspective like this, I'll be able to use Pixinsight's inbuilt banding removal tool to try and remove this banding here. Not sure if it'll work, but I'll try. Here we go. All right. Now let's see if Pixinsight's tool works. So if you ever need to remove banding, if you have a Canon DSLR or something like that, you go to Script Utilities and you have Canon banding reduction. It's important to protect from highlights. Let's see if this works. Didn't work particularly well. Yeah, it didn't really work, but that's to be expected. I mean, it's quite faint banding. Anyway, let's go back to dynamic background extraction. So here we can roughly make out that there's some dust in the surrounding area, so we're not going to want to place our points there. One thing which is perfectly fine to do is to place your points manually, especially when you're dealing with data like this. I find that fine-tuning and just placing the points yourself gives a better result. Is because the last thing you want is to have any points on top of existing nebulosity, because that'll start ruining your image. So here we go. It is a bit of a mess, and it's not really a precise science. It's fine to kind of just throw them all over. It doesn't matter all that much. So we go to division, we discard the background model, and let's have a look. Here we go. That's a lot better. You can see we've managed to get rid of basically all of the gradienting. We still have a tiny bit maybe surrounding the galaxy in this area, but that's the interference caused by the banding. And with that, we have a successfully DBE'd image, especially, you know, when you compare the before and after. That's, yeah, it's a big difference. There we go. All right. So next up, we have some narrowband data. This was taken during with the LX Stream filter and still a one-shot color camera. You can see here we have very heavy gradient here from light pollution. I live in a Bortle 9, so it's to be expected. Now, one thing to help with being able to figure out where the nebulosity is when doing a dynamic background extraction is to unlink our auto stretch. So we go to screen transfer function over here, and we just click this little icon, and then we auto stretch, and you can see that it's almost color calibrated the image, well, the auto stretch for us. We can easily now see that we have nebulosity around this area, maybe a tiny bit here. So now, like before, we go straight to dynamic background extraction. Sample radius of 35, 15 per row, and we'll generate, and you can see that, oh dear, it's placed it right on top of the nebula, but that's not an issue because we can just move them out of the way. And we will want to be moving them out of the way because, again, we'll ruin our DBE if we don't. And there we go. Another thing that's important is that if you have any dithering artifacts, like I do up here, try to not have your points on them because it will interfere with your DBE and it'll create a bit of a gradient around the top. So I'm just going to be moving all of these points away from the edges. Here we go. That should be good. Now, well, we can run a DBE. There we go. That's, you can see, a lot better. You can see, you know, a bit of artifacts up there, but there's no real gradienting anymore, and we've managed to successfully run DB on this. Now, finally, what we can do is move on to the monochrome data. This is considerably easier to process, although it's not that much different, in all honesty. This here was taken again with the 72ED, but with a 533mm probe. So, just as always, we're going to go back into DBE. Now, when you're dealing with data like this, you can see we have a lot of nebulosity everywhere. So just doing the automatic generation can be quite problematic because, you know, that's not very useful. And even if we increase the tolerance, now it's everywhere. So instead, what we're going to have to do is place them all manually. So with this, I'll go up to 50. So it's very important here that we place them manually in areas, whoopsie, of no nebulosity. We can see there's maybe a bit there. This area here isn't very nebulous. That's a bad flat I took there. See here in the corner, it's quite dark. These regions here, a bit around this area, especially in this corner here. And now we can just quickly experiment and put it in the dark nebula as well. We can experiment very quickly and see how this comes out. So I think that's quite nice, although here at the bottom, it's a bit of a strange pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'll just close it and I'll put some more points around the bottom here to try and emphasize that there is issue with the background in this region. I'll add a few more points all around, maybe another there. And let's have another look at how this DBE looks and see it solved it a bit. Not a huge improvement, but it helps. And we can see that, our whole background is now a lot more clean overall. I'm afraid, yeah, there's a dust spot there. Can't do much to help that. I've changed my camera framing already. So now we've done our DBE. Another very important thing we can do is just blur X. Again, with this script, image analysis, FWHM eccentricity, we measure this and I have an FWHM of 2.17 pixels. So we just go back into blur X, 2.17 pixels. Sharpen non-stellar can be high, it doesn't matter too much. Sharpen our stars a bit, correct first, very important. And we run it on our image. You can also use deconvolution for this, but it is a lot more convoluted as a method. So I think it's worth splashing the extra money just to get Blur Exterminator. And there we go. You can see we've had a nice little boost to the clarity of our image, especially down here. Yeah, we can see nice and big improvement. Now, I think that there's not much we can do with this image, but indeed there is. We can open up Noise Exterminator, quickly run it on this image, and it'll very much help with, any noise we have. But if you're dealing with a single channel image like this, there is something rather fun we can do. If you're a bit impatient like me and you don't want to wait until you get oxygen signal on your images, what we can do is a bit of a cheeky thing called false color. So we take our histogram, we take our auto stretch, we can drag it directly from this onto here. See, wrong thing, my bad. We can drag this onto here and plop it on, X that, and we'll see that, we have a auto stretched image. It's not ideal by any means, but it gets quite nice results. Now, you're asking, how do we turn this into a color image? Now, what I'm going to do is duplicate this. If you have a second image, I'm going to open up Curves Transformation, going to get a preview open, and I'm going to darken this image. I'm going to try to kill the highlights to try and emulate what an oxygen file might look like, a bit more dulled, a bit less interesting. Let's have a look at this. All right, that could work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called Forax HOO. It's a pixel math script, which you can find online quite easily, which just has a fancy combination for the green channel. So what I'll do is I'll take the HA identifier, throw it onto this, and the O3 identifier and put it onto this, our synthetic oxygen file. And now we can have a look at how this looks. You can see, oh, interesting. We have color on this image now. Now, it doesn't look fantastic. Fine. We can do a bit of color calibration, set a nice little background there. We can go to background neutralization and quickly fix up the background a bit. That didn't work fantastic. Oh well. All processes, go back to our curves transformation. And we can see if we can do anything fun with the hue. We can shift it around, saturate it. Oh, that's quite nice. Maybe even increase our contrast. And there we go, just like that. We've managed to turn a mono image like this, nice and boring, into a much more interesting color image albeit not accurate in the slightest, but still quite pretty and enough to please any impatient people. And with this image, that brings this episode of pre-processing to a close. I know I've been quite quick with my explanations, so you'll probably have to rewatch it if you want keeping up. But I hope that I've managed to be useful, and I hope that I've maybe managed to fix some people's issues with DBE. We've seen many people having some very interesting gradients in their images from not doing DBE or not doing it properly. So I wanted to make a video to help clarify the correct way, maybe not correct, but a good way of doing dynamic background extraction and all sorts of preprocessing on your images. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.